Hello? Hello? What's going on? I'm not in my usual place. I'm not in my studio. I haven't got all my records and all my trinkets. I'm just sat here in this huge, infinite black space of nothingness. Do you know where I reckon I am? I think, rather than being my usual YouTubing studio, today I'm in the world of the imagination. And because I haven't imagined anything, there's nothing here, it's just black. So really, I need to imagine something. So, first thing that comes into my head, let's think. Let's pick a person, because I'm lonely. You see, I'm a bit lonely. So let's bring somebody into the space. So, how about Tom Selleck? Tom Selleck. So come on, let's have a Tom Selleck. Brilliant. Oh, look at him. What a beautiful man. Look at that shirt. Look at that moustache. Oh, that's wonderful. Now I've got something there in front of me. I can start to fire up the imagination. This is just a random thought, a random idea that's just been pulled out of space. Tom Selleck sat there. Where is he? Where did Tom Selleck live? Was it in Hawaii? It was Hawaii, wasn't it? Yeah. Well, let's not have him in Hawaii. Where shall we put him? Where would Tom Selleck? Where would we like to see Tom Selleck? It's not you. It's where would I like to see him? It's my infinite space of the imagination, isn't it? So where should we put him? How about we put him in space? Oh, that's a bit better. He's looking good, but I don't think he's looking cosmic enough, is he? And I don't want him just to look like a spaceman, an astronaut. I want him to look like cosmic in the way that Sun Ra is cosmic or George Clinton is cosmic. So let's just do that. So go on, Tom. I'm going to make you cosmic. There. Right now, I have now created something. It's never existed before. It's a cosmic Tom Selleck in outer space. Now, the question is, do you like it or don't you? Right? Do you find my cosmic Tom Selleck in outer space, do you find it beautiful? Right? And the question is, if you're finding it beautiful now, right, or maybe you're finding it funny, or maybe you're finding it confusing, but whatever is happening, you are reacting to it. And the question is your reaction entirely subjective or is it objective? In other words, is what you're experiencing, right, the beauty of it, and I'm using beauty in a very wide term remit, because this also encompasses ugliness, funniness, craziness, weirdness. But is the feeling it's giving you, do you think it is the same as somebody else, or you think it's different? Or is it a mixture of the two? Right? Is there, right, an objective art where we can predict how it makes somebody feel? Right? When we look at something, we can say, that's going to make somebody feel like that. Or do we all react in different ways to art? Right? So let's have a look at a nice, beautiful picture now. Come on, let's have a look at that. That's lovely. That is. There we go. The Hay Wain. The Hay Wain, right, is one of the most famous paintings in history, and it was painted by Constable. And as you can see, it depicts a lovely rustic setting, very similar to the sort of rustic leafy setting that I opened up with this video with. All right? And we could see a stream, and we could see like the old-fashioned days where everything was nice and simple and it's sunny, and it looks like the sort of place you want to be in, right? And that makes me feel like I want to be in there. So I'm asking you, would you want to be there? Now, I'm sure some of you will and some of you won't, right? But how many of you, when you're looking at that, are getting similar feelings? Are they similar? Or do you think they're absolutely different to every single person on the planet? Right? So let's get this a little bit simpler, shall we? Let's really boil this down, right? I'm going to show you a picture now, and I want you to tell me what you think of these pictures. Actually, I'm going to show you three. I am making this up as I go along, even though I'm sat in the infinite space of the imagination, which now contains the Hay Wain, right? I am still making this up as I go along, right? So just remember that. So I think I'm going to show you 3 pictures, not 1 picture, right? So let's have a go then. So here's picture number 1. I want you to have a look at this one. Have a good look. Very abstract, isn't it? Okay, now I'm going to show you another picture, right? And I want you to have a look at that. See how it makes you feel. Here's the second picture. Lovely, right? Now I'm going to show you the last picture. How does that one make you feel? Now I'm going to try and predict how I think those pictures made you feel. And if I'm right, or sort of right, it will show you that beauty is not necessarily in the eye of the beholder. There might be common traits that we have. What are they? And that's on this video I'm going to try and explore, right? So, but before we go on, let's just have a look at pictures again. So here's number 1, here's number 2, and here's number 3. Now, I think the one that made you feel the most calm and serene was number 2. And the one that made you feel slightly more on edge and like, oh, I'm not sure about this one, was number 3. And number 1 was sort of in the middle between the two. So, if you agreed with what I'd say, I want to put your hands up. Yeah, all put your hands up now. Yeah, now you see, there's quite a few people here that are agreeing with what I said, or the truth is I can't see you and I'm just making it up so that it agrees with my thesis. Who knows? This is the thing about life, right? Is stuff objective or subjective? Is that statement I just made about your hands, is it correct? It could be correct because I can't actually see you. It could be correct, right? And there is a large percentage of you that have agreed that number 2 was the most relaxing, number 3 was the most on edge, and number 1 was sort of in the middle, right? Now, why is that? I tell you why I think this is because of biology. And biology is one of the things that makes us like or not liked, makes us think something's beautiful or not. We have inherited certain things that keep us alive, right? And for hundreds of thousands of years, your ancestors have had to search for spaces which looked safe. Right? Nobody wants to sleep on the edge of a cliff, you know, like Frodo does and Samwise does in Lord of the Rings. Nobody wants to sleep there. That's a horrible place to sleep. They want to find somewhere where it's nice and sunny and calm and there's a gentle breeze, where you can feel that the land's flat, there's a bit of protection around you, and there's no threats. Right, now, the second picture, even though it was abstract, is sort of reminding you of a landscape space, which is settled, it's flat, it's got some little, maybe mountains in the background that's holding you in, that's protecting you, right? The first one was the same, but because the horizon was much higher, we couldn't see as far, we couldn't see out, and it didn't quite work in the same way as number 2. Of course, number 3 was more like being sat on that cliff edge that Frodo sat on when he gets upset with Gollum, right? Sorry about the Lord of the Rings, it's because I'm in infinite space, you see, so to just get this out of my head. So this is what's in my head at the moment, is that, right? Now that there, to me, is perilous. I don't want to be there. I would rather be here or here, right? Does this make sense? Our biology determines how we view art. And because we're all human beings and we share a biology, although it's not 100% objective, right? There is still a degree of objectivity there. The question is, if I've pretty much proved that there are objective aspects in art, right, in our perception of art, in our perception of beauty, why is it that a lot of people think that our appreciation of beauty is entirely subjective? This is something that is said over and over again on my channel in the comments, that people say, how can you make a judgment like that? Because beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Now let's go right back to the start of my video. I asked you, how did that make you feel? And hopefully it made you feel the same as maybe that picture of the Haywain or that number 2 picture I just showed you. It made you feel peaceful and serene and relaxed, because the stuff I'm putting in, I'm predicting will make you feel like that. That is the thing upon which art is built. When an artist sits down, they are not assuming that everyone has their own interpretation of it. They're assuming that what they do will sort of, not necessarily totally, but sort of agree with the intentions of the artist, right? Now, you may ask yourself why I've started the video like this. Because my friend Martin Miller, who is a much more successful YouTuber than me, sent me a message the other day, and he said that he felt on YouTube video quality wasn't as important as audio quality. Now, my voice on my YouTube videos is recorded on the camera, on the microphone on the camera, right? And that is not a great microphone. This has been recorded on a proper microphone, and then I've done stuff with the EQ and had a little bit of compression. I might even put a little bit of reverb, because it will give you the feeling that I am sat in this sort of infinite space of the imagination. There's a second I just made one, that by putting reverb on will make you feel more in infinite space, right? It may feel like that. A lot of these things are there. I can sort of predict, right? The other thing with the music, and I will just a piece I wrote a few weeks ago for a project, is the mind and the keys. Only if you feel serene, relaxed, I like the infinite space of the imagination, but getting in and out is bloody horrible. Right, glad to be back here. I know what I'm doing here. Right, so I think there are 3 influences on our appreciation of art and music and all things aesthetic. Right, the first of these 3 is our biology. It's things that we have evolved, right? We have evolved to survive, and in surviving, we evolved to be able to seek pleasure and repel threat, okay? At the beginning of this video, I really explored this idea of human beings that throughout history looking for a safe place to reside and being able to recognize that. The people who would find a safe place to reside would of course survive, and so the ability to do that would have evolved, and that is an aesthetic ability. Another example would be the repetitive tasks that we have to do daily, especially when we were in like hunter-gatherer, or when we were like had, you know, subsistence farming, you know. So imagine you've got to plough a field, and to go and plough a field you've got to do circular repetitive movement. If you're not going to kill yourself, you've got to do it without strain or stress. When you hear music that's funky, groovy, swingy, what you're hearing is circular movement without strain or stress. A drummer or musician who has got stress when they play, you can hear it, and we're programmed to recognize that. These are the sort of aesthetic things that we are programmed to recognize, and I think that goes across all humanity. We've all got those skills. We've also got the skills to recognize when things are in and out of tune, in and out of time. We can recognize soft sounds, hard sounds, you know, things that are fast, things that are slow, and I think these are universal things, right? So I would say when you're listening to a piece of music or you're looking at a piece of art, I would say about 1/3 of it is definitely what we could call objective. Now, you could argue whether my terms of what objective is, but I'm using objective in that my experience will be predictable in another human being. Of course, we can get really existential and wonder whether that even exists, you know, is my orange the same as your orange and all that type of thing. But for the sake of argument, what we're doing, we're saying these things are predictable. When a piece of music's loud, if I write a piece of music that's loud, when someone hears it, they will go, that is loud, that's the loud bit. And they won't be going, oh, that bit's quiet. No, it isn't, that was supposed to be loud, no, it sounds quiet to me. That is objective. So 1/3 of art and music is objective, right? The next thing, right at the other end of the scale, is our personal history. It's the things that we grew up with. It's our music our parents played us. It's the music our friends played us. It's things that we discovered in a time and a place. You know, it's certain radio shows that happen to be on. It's certain gigs that might have happened. We have a personal history, which is all of our own personal experience will colour what we like and what we know and what we love and all that type of stuff. So right at the other end is that there's that third, which is entirely subjective. Right in the middle is our culture. You know, so people who grow up in a certain country will be used to certain types of music. So if you go to a certain country, you go to China or you go to India, and you could sort of predict what those people might like. You can't predict it wholly. So I would say that the cultural aspect of appreciation is a bit messy, but it's sort of predictable. Okay? Okay, and even in the one that's the personal history, there's a cultural, like they sort of, all these things bleed together, right? This is why advertising works, because they wouldn't spend loads of money on advertising if it didn't work. And nowadays, what they're trying to do is they're trying to predict the demographic. This person is this age, so they probably like this, and they got this interest, blah, blah, blah. So if you try and sell them that, they'll buy it, right? Art is not entirely subjective. Beauty is not entirely in the eye of the beholder. Okay, so at the end of this video, I'm going to grab a couple of my patrons and we're going to have a chat about this, because I don't want it just to be my opinion. I want to open up and get some other opinions, because of course that's the whole point of this. I'm not doing this just to say my point. I'm trying to say stuff that might make you think. And I think this idea that beauty is in the eye of the beholder is widely held amongst people. Now, if you went back 150 years, it wasn't the case. People had definite ideas of what art and music was, and they would write books to say, this is how you do good music, this is how you do good art, and all that type of stuff. And in a way, when you actually go on YouTube and look at tutorial videos for painting, making music, that thing is still there. But there's this idea that we all have our own opinion. You know, the idea we put the meaning into a piece of art, right? Now, part of that has come out of the history of art. Art, you know, if you go back 150 years, 200 years, you look at art and music around then, it was very specific. It used the tools that I have described very well. So you could sort of predict what it was supposed to sound and feel like, right? But the history of 20th century art and the history of 20th century art has driven philosophy, all right? So when you look at the sort of philosophical journey through the 20th century from modernism into postmodernism, and modernism, postmodernism is the idea that we are really, there's no such thing as an author, right? That the artist is just reconstituting stuff that comes from culture. You know, there is pretty much no biology, everything is culturally informed. The idea that, that meaning is really, there is no meaning. There's no truth categories. These are all the things that have come out of late 20th century philosophy, right? And these questions had to be asked, but they are very difficult, esoteric questions, but these questions have filtered into the mainstream. So that's why I think we are living in a culture now where people think it's quite a natural thing to say, right, when someone hears a minor chord, they can all have their own appreciation or perception of that. This idea that a minor chord sounds sad and a major chord sounds happy just does not exist. Now, what I'm arguing is it's a mixture of the two. And what's really interesting is I think once you get these three factors, especially if you're a musician, if you understand and you can see the parts in your track which are definitely objective, you know, if you're trying to write something exciting, it's going to be fast, it's going to have lots of notes, right? I want it to be exciting, right? I want it to be exciting, but I want it to be sad, no more than sad. I want it to sound sinister, so I'll do it in the minor, right? But I'll also do it with a minor second. I'll really make it minor. Go to that fridge and make it sound dark. And it's so important to understand those things are in there, right? Those are the material of music. And it's the same with art and same with literature. Then there's the culture. And in culture, that responds in terms of music, in terms of genre. Genres are linked to cultures, and culture is linked to a certain space. So if you're into jazz, jazz starts in New Orleans, and there's a space there and a context which gives you that idea. If you were into punk and new wave in the late 70s, then you got CBGBs and all those bands coming out there, and all that's your culture, right? And the culture you sort of know. And this is what record companies do. They look at that culture, they look at the style and say, well, that we can sort of predict what they're going to like, and they really try and push that. They use the material, the biological material, and then they push the culture. And the thing that makes it sits on the top, that bristles away, making it seem like it's really, really subjective, is our own personal experience, which seems to come before anything else, right? So this afternoon, I had a discussion with some of my patrons. Oh God, the light today is so weird, and in a way, I think it's really apt for this video. This has never happened before. Look at it. Look at what is going on. I got no control over this. Honestly, artists, musicians, you never really have total control. You have to roll with the punches. Right? So here I am. You can see my face. And part of it is lit up. Part of it we can predict. We can see it's lit up by the light of intention, of the light of perception. But part of my face is in the dark. We don't know what's going on there. It's unpredictable. It's chaotic. And that's precisely what I'm saying is what happens with our appreciation of art. These two things are there. Right, those two things are working together, exactly like what you're seeing now on this film. And I think the role of the artist is to understand the mechanisms that are objective and really understand how they work, but be able to roll when something like this happens, rather than going, oh, stop, it's all going to be perfect, it's not my intention, because we have a massive clash with artists and musicians who are trying to make it entirely objective. They want control over everything. Now, if you've listened to my talk, I've just explained there's a whole ton of it which you cannot control. People's own personal history will influence how they listen to you, and what you think is bad, they might think is good, right? But by the same token, it's not all subjective at the same time. So you have to be able to control the bits you know, the raw matter, the biological stuff. You have to be able to understand the culture, but also take the risk that there's going to be someone out there whose own personal history is so unique and strange that they might just see something in your art or music that you don't. Now that is weird, isn't it? Right, so as I was saying, before God decided to, take away the top half of my head, I had a chat with my patrons earlier on today. We had a really good talk, and they actually changed my opinion. So big thank you for my patrons. And if you do want to come on, my Patreon, it's not like I just put a whole few photos of me on holiday and maybe, a little bit of video shot on my phone of me walking the dog. It did start off like that, but now there's something really exciting happened, and I'm getting the patrons involved in this thing that I am doing here. So if you want to get involved, become a patron. So I've done the sell, right? You're now going to see a conversation with my patrons on this very subject, right? And you will see that some of the ideas in this video here were informed by what we discussed and what they said. So hopefully it'll be interesting for you to see the mechanism there. Okay, so I hope you enjoy this next bit. So here's my patrons, and thank you, patrons, and I'll see you at the end of the video. Hello, patrons. How are you?
Good afternoon.
Excellent.
Yeah, so I apologise again. I've apologised off camera. Apologised again for being a little bit late. So I've only got two of you in, but you're the two good ones, aren't you? You're like top of the class, really, aren't you? So I will push you out some gold stars that you could put on your little chart. So I'm making a video at the moment which is looking at whether art is objective or subjective. It's a thing that people put in the comments of my channel over and over again. They use this phrase that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? So I'd like to have your thoughts on that, whether you think
that when you're looking at a piece of art or a piece of music, whether what you're seeing is completely your opinion, right? Entirely your opinion, or do you think the artist has an intention in being able to control your opinion, and that the feelings you're getting are sort of predictable, or is it a mixture? And if it is a mixture, what aspects are subjective and what aspects are objective? So who wants to kick off first? Doran, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so of course that's a really, it's a really deep sort of question, and it's never a binary, answer. It's never one thing or the other. It seems like it's a fractal, kind of approach. The more you dig deeper, the more it branches out, and at a certain point, it has to be subjective. I mean, I'm sure you can hear something and say, "Oh, I know this guy will definitely like it," right?
Yeah.
And so you sort of build that, map, that that if you go in this direction, if you use these and these tools, then you get to this objective, and you know that this objective will answer will have an objective sort of characteristic or some kind of an aesthetic to it that will hit something. But then it never does, right? I mean, people have tried this over and over again. They've tried to replicate some kind of a formula that would sort of aim at that specific audience, and eventually some make it and some don't. And it's much deeper once you go into the weeds, because it's so the amount of variables that are there are so great, and the audience is so different, and everyone has its own. I mean, every person is different, right? So it's like the more you want to dig into it, the harder it gets. So you're getting what I mean. You understand what I'm trying to follow. So it's definitely subjective. I mean, I can tell you that people that have the same taste in music will have two different answers about what their favorite album is, right? And there will be albums which are so controversial that you will just go mad and think, how can this be so controversial, where it should have been, and some albums that we consider like great, and a lot of people consider great, when you come to a person and you ask, is this your favorite, it won't. Or the opposite way, the other way around. It's like, you won't believe what my favorite Yes album is, right? It's not Close to the Edge.
It better not be drama.
Neither me.
No, it's not drama, but my favorite.
In my prog world, there's a contingent that really loves drama, and it's a specific neo prog, or they love drama. But so, what's your favorite Yes album?
It's Going for the One.
Same here.
It's Going for the One. I mean, I don't know if it's because of a specific year and time where I was listening to it when I was a kid, or is it because the video that was, I mean, during the 80s, we had a video of the entire sessions, seeing Chris Squire and like, doing the session. I mean, the band was in the recording room, and it was videoed, so everybody could have seen that's these sessions, and it was amazing. And I can tell you for sure that I also have a problem with the Mahavishnu, right? Everybody's on the Emerald as the best album, and
they weren't before though. I think I've invented that.
Yeah, you've invented that.
I'm gonna take credit. No one said that until I started saying it, and now they're all right. At least on my YouTube, they're all coming over now. Yeah, we think it's Vision of the Emerald Beyond. No,
yeah.
I've invented that, and I only did it to be a contrarian, to whip up a bit
amazing.
of stink. We all know it's in the Mountain Flame. Like I know.
You wind up the clicks, don't you?
And the best song is You Know.
I do like to give it a good prod every now and then to see what happens. Yes.
Yeah, and the best song the best song by Mahavishnu is never, you can't name one song. It's really the best performance in the best, the best performance from 1972. Whatever that best performance is, this is where you'll find the best songs. I mean, they're all great, but it's the performance during these live shows, you have on YouTube in Berlin, or I think it's in Italy. There's one on the BBC. There's like a million shows. And today, this is like what I'm listening to. I go to, I watch like 10 different versions, and that's the best album, or something like that.
Let's bring Colin in. What do you think, Colin? Where's your position?
I think the original idea is the thing. It's both subjective and objective, but the original idea, I think we mentioned it on a couple of videos back, that somebody put a toilet in a museum.
Yeah. And
somebody said, I could do that. But the original idea of it, I was in Paris a few years ago, and we walked in this museum, and there was a 20-foot long Swiss Army knife, just with all its things out. And it was the main exhibit in the main hall. And I'm thinking, why? Well, to me, it's not art, but people are coming in. So somebody had the idea that I can do that, and people will come in and watch it. So,
this is where I am a contrarian, as I said, because most people, when you talk to them, you both said that you think it's subjective. And I think art is a lot more objective than people think. I think it's, I don't think it's entirely objective. That's obviously not the case, because we all do have differing opinions. But when Doran was describing, talking his way through it, he sort of covered my concept on this. Right. So he started off and said the artist has an intention. Right. Now, if it's entirely subjective, why would the artist bother? Why would the musician bother? I spent all my time making music, and I'm doing stuff to make it sound good. Right. And musicians get really wound up if it doesn't sound good. And the reason is because they're sort of assuming that the listener is at least going to get the certain aspect of it. Right. If you can't predict what the audience is going to feel or think, there is absolutely no point. Right. So that does bring in an element of objectivity there. Right. The other thing is, when we started to discuss albums, their favorite albums, right, that's a good argument, but no one's going to say Big Generator.
Exactly.
Right. So there's a degree, right? There's a degree. And when you said going for the one, I'm like, yeah. And I'm starting thinking, yeah, that could be my favorite album. Right. Close to the Edge, going for the one, maybe Fragile.
Maybe, yeah.
Topographic Oceans, people have that. But, there's a million, albums there, and no one's picking all the other ones. So there's a level of objectivity. So it's as though there's a sort of vague clump of objectivity in the middle, but the outside, which is the bit you focus on, is entirely subjective. And I think that there's three things that influence our appreciation of art. The first is our biology, and because we're human beings, we share a biology. So this is like major and minor, things in time, out of time, things in key, not in key, notes bending, not, things speeding up and slowing down. All those things, I think, have a general appreciation, which is the same for everybody. There's a biological aspect. Now, artists could use that. They could use it. So I'm not saying just because something's in a minor key, it's gonna make you feel sad, but that aspect works in a certain way. And the thing that made me think this was our perception of pitch is unbelievable, right? Our perception of light isn't that different. If you got a shade of orange and just moved it slight fraction, we wouldn't be able to tell the difference. But with pitch, it can be just a tiny bit out, and most human beings will go, oh, that doesn't sound quite right.
It's physiological, right?
Yeah.
It's like you get this kind of beating in your ear and your head.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel comfortable. That's like a very biological aesthetic feeling, which can't be sort of, it has to be objective.
Yeah, that's
To
so.
some
So,
extent.
but I think that part's objective, right? Now, at the other end, we have our personal history, don't we? And you said exactly that. Most of us always have a soft spot for the first album by that band that we heard. You know, so if I'm being really honest, if I had to pick one Mavish Orchestra album, it would be Birds of Fire. Because
Exactly, you
Birds of
said
Fire
that
was the
4
first one I
times.
heard, and it's got the
Yeah.
magic. You know.
Yeah, this is what you went to the store and
Yeah.
you picked it up, and you know, it changed your life, right?
Yeah, I know. So I think your personal history, which also includes what your family listened to, brothers and sisters, what people at school listen to, all that thing that's specifically you, really gives you a much stronger subjective thing. But in the end, it's not that, even that's not entirely subjective, because you can sort of predict certain things. Me and my brother really do love all the music that my dad played us. He's not a jazz fan, but as he's got older, he's been buying up all these albums that my dad played me, just like me, you know. Now,
Yeah.
in the middle is the third factor, which is our culture. And that is, so it's like when I've gone around teaching in the UK, if you go into an inner city, you know, those kids are going to like hip hop and drill and all that type of stuff. And if you go out to the sort of posh rural places, they're going to like much more like the Linkin Parks and the rock bands, and you could see a different difference. And obviously, when we go and
That's
listen
the
to
environment,
music,
sort of,
yeah.
right?
So
the environment.
that's my basic thesis. That the questioning is how that mixed together and how that works in the long term. And one thing you said, Doran, that did sway me a little bit is you said, yeah, there's all these objective elements in it, but when you zoom out and see it, that chaos is making it
Or when you zoom in.
subjective, because you can't predict this. Your argument is because you can't predict. And my argument against that is, I think if that was the case, they wouldn't spend all this money on advertising.
I think also it takes you back to a time and an emotion and what you were going through at that time and what group of your culture, your social you were going through. Like you'd get into your prog rock bands, your mates, they were great mates, you went for a drink with them, but they might be listening to Noble Soul or, you know, a bit of stuff that we weren't listening to. But that's a separate culture. You might went to the pub together, but you were split on your music.
Yeah, there is that. But then when you look at it, that will be affected by your personal history. You've got your personal history affecting the culture, and right underneath it is the biology, the things that are. I mean, if you start listing the traits that are common in music, you'll start to think it's all that is all. It is entirely objective. Once you start to, I mean, if you're a musician and you've studied it, you know what has an effect, you know how to do things, you know that if you put that there and you put that there, and it's like,
you push the right buttons.
You've got your aesthetic intention, and you're trying to
and this is what producers do.
Yeah,
and this is what they do. Like they have this vision, they know how to press those buttons, but still the amount of things that, you know, deviate in the wrong way, and the way that the perception sometimes doesn't hit it right. I mean, this is what really amazes me, that because everything is evolving all the time and it's changing, the minute you think something is good, it could be a minute too late. And there's a sort of there's a timeline or some kind of an evolution that you are in it. You can never predict it because you are in it. And so the amount of, you know, the variables are just endless. It's becoming chaotic.
I've worked on this idea that these three factors, right? And I've thought, is there any other factor? Now, if that's what it is, that's what it is. It's those three factors: biology, culture, personal history. But you're right in that the timeline that you're in also has an effect, doesn't it? That certain things, you
can create the best music in 1950. And then in 1952, it's not going to interest anybody. Or, you know, if imagine like two people doing the same thing in two different timelines. It could be the same as culture, you know, like the culture changes. The culture has like an axis, has a vector that you are sort of, it's another dimension that you can open. I'm thinking about this because I was preparing for a different discussion.
I'm sorry
preparing
about
about the future of jazz, and I was like, for a week,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about what, you know, I have so much to say about that, and I was preparing those sentences about how the environment affected or impacted jazz. You know, before, like, jazz in the 20s and the 30s was like the mainstream, and it became in the 40s like it was the thing, and then it started to die out and became, it was already boxed and ready to hibernate when the environment around it started to change so much that it started pouring, you know, Brazilian music and samba or bossa nova, and then and Cuban music, and then it was rock and roll and rock. And so the more different styles exist around jazz, the more jazz can flourish. And jazz can't really live on its own. It sort of started to die in the early 50s or late 50s. And then there were kind of injections into that style that kept it alive. So it didn't hibernate. And, you know, when you're asking if jazz is dead, and I'm saying, no, it's not dead. It's just hibernating. It's formaldehyded. And we just need to stop talking about jazz and start talking about music that will eventually creep into jazz and revive it again. So we just need to stop talking about jazz.
I would interpret what you're saying as context.
Context, yeah.
Context, because context covers a number of things that you just said. You've got the sort of historical context of something coming out at the right time, but you've also got the location context as well. If you're in a certain place and at a certain time, you know, most music, new forms of music really are completely tied to space, aren't they? To place, sorry. So, you know, jazz is tied to New Orleans, blues is tied to Chicago, the new wave scene is tied to CBGB's, you could go on and on and on, you know. Without that there just wouldn't have happened, you know.
Think about world music like gypsy music or flamenco. These are styles that evolved for a certain time and then they stopped evolving, and today they are like, you know, they are they're just showcasing. You don't need to do anything new in flamenco to be a successful flamenco player. You don't need to invent new styles of gypsy music to do gypsy music in Croatia. You don't need to invent ragas again in order to be a great Indian sitar player. In rock and jazz, it's like a different mentality because I'm trying to think about it, how different these styles of music are, that they have to evolve in order to survive, where other styles of music can survive without evolving.
But that might not be true. You see, it might be the case that all these music started off like jazz, and they have that 50-year period where that started, like flamenco would have started out and people would have done this, and then that'd be that innovation, and all those innovations then create a style. And once the style's there, then people just naturally come and go, right, let's try and protect this style. And then they start putting the barriers up, and then you've got a style, you know.
Exactly.
And
why do we need it to evolve? Why do we want jazz and rock to evolve? Why are we so fanatic about it? And it also
I think that's really interesting. With this talk, I've got Doran, who's a musician. I can tell he's a musician because he's got some guitars behind him and cables. It's the cables that's the giveaway, right?
Yeah, the cables.
And I bet you've got a few boxes of cables of like cables that don't do anything anymore.
Yeah, and pedals that I'm trying to fix.
That's a hallmark of a musician. If you've got a box of stuff like old MIDI cables that's got the end chopped off, and you go, I might keep that because MIDI might come back, and I might, you know.
Yeah, or like insert cables with the the stereo and the dual mono that you never use.
You're never going to use it now. So I could tell that. So you know, Doran, Colin, you're a music fan, aren't you?
I play guitar.
You play guitar? Oh yes, he's got a guitar in the background. See, I'm not there. There it is. How could I not see it?
I've got my PRS there.
What do you do? You just pick it up and play it and strum it, or do you write stuff? Do you
I wrote a few tunes back in the day. I'm more of a club band, never gone sort of professional or anything like that.
Oh, but you played in bands in clubs?
Yeah, we cut my teeth in the working men's clubs in Yorkshire and Barnsley and Sheffield. Yeah,
That's where I started.
Original music?
No, not in the
original-
working man's club in Barnsley. No way.
Okay.
No, we'll be playing a bit of music for them, and then it was the bingo.
Yeah.
Usually after that it was Elvis and a bit of singing stuff, but we give them Pink Floyd, and it was the punk era, so it was the late 70s, 80s. So they quite liked it. We're giving a bit of stiff little fingers of that. But yeah, just I play guitar every day for 15 years.
So you are both musicians. How do you think your taste has been coloured by the first music you liked? And how did that work?
100% for me. 100%. But influence. I mean, Dad was into, and we listened to it, because we had to. Elvis, Lonnie Donegan, and Frank Highfield. I know words and yodels for Frank Highfield tunes that I never learnt. I know every word, every note. And when Prog come out, I don't know what it was, but it had that that aesthetic, if I could put it. It was different. When I was 6-7 years old, and one of my mates were listening to early stuff, well, Lonnie Donegan and Frank Highfield were totally different. And then Elvis singing his gospel stuff, totally different.
Yeah, because I think this is the thing which this is the bit that's the subjective bit. It's your personal history and these specific things that you grow up with, and they have a huge effect on you, right? But even with
it's like a fingerprint, and it's like a fingerprint. There's no two people alike, right? There's no.
It's really hard to. It's really hard. I'll give you an example. I'm at a certain age. I'm in my 50s. A lot of the prog musicians I work with are the same age, right? I've been rehearsing last couple of days with Tim Bowness from No Man, and he's the sort of same age as me. John Jarrett from IQ, a little bit older than me. I've worked with Rob Reed, same age as me, right? And when you sit and talk to them, because we're British and we're that age, we've discovered a certain thing that, as we have all said, took us towards prog, and it's so strange, right? And what it is, and I've done a video on this somewhere. In the 70s, when I was growing up, everyone started buying stereos, and you used to get certain albums with those stereos. And there was an arranger called Jeff Love, wasn't there, Colin? Jeff Love, and Jeff Love would do Jeff Love's favorite love themes, Jeff Love's favorite big war movie themes, but Jeff Love's favorite space
and
themes.
Dad always had one copy, didn't they?
Yeah, and everyone had a copy. And I had Jeff Love's big war movie themes. Rod Reed had Jeff Love's space themes. And I've chatted to someone else, and when I put this on, so many proggers on my YouTube are saying the same thing, really specific. There's these things for me of my age, and I'm sure Colin, it's the same type of thing that those sort of albums that your parents had, especially those sort of BBC arranged albums, like.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking back the Western ones. Was it Enrico? Somebody.
Ennio Morricone.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I got into him. I started listening to his stuff. Fantastic music.
Yeah, and I think that thing takes you towards prog. And of course, I've also spoken about this at my age. Tommy Vance's radio show.
Absolutely.
That was like really specific things. I mean, you mentioned
the one with the Van der Graaf theme, right? The one with the Van der Graaf theme.
Yeah, with the Van der Graaf generator theme. Yeah, and it was he used to have the 10 greatest tunes of all time. And every year, I can remember listening to it twice. He played Awaken off Going for the One. And I can remember sitting with the headphones on, and I was like into Iron Maiden, and this came on. And to this day, that's my favorite prog tune. Awaken is just on another level. And I've always said that side 2 of Going for the One is perhaps the greatest side.
Yeah,
in progressive rock.
That.
You know, if you
You
want to
did
hear
say
a
that.
short pop prog song, Wondrous Stories is about the best ever written, and Awaken is the best epic ever written, and they do everything on that on that side. I
Right.
think
It's on
side
the
one's a
side,
little weak here and there.
On the sideline, I have a music program on Mixcloud, and for the past 6 months or so, I've been playing dozens and dozens of Tommy Vance and Alan Freedman tapes. I've just been broadcasting the tapes from the 70s.
Yeah, you emailed me about it, didn't you?
Yeah, there's loads and loads.
Wow.
Yeah, it's nice listening back with everything. I cut out news, but you know, all the jingles and everything. It comes back to you, doesn't it? Takes you straight back to a place and a time.
Yeah, I when I was playing with Robert, I did a gig. We were doing a gig somewhere, and I was gone up to my rider, and I was pulling up some stuff, and suddenly behind me there was this voice that said, "Excuse me, are you all right if I could grab a couple of drinks and a few sausage rolls or whatever it was?" And that voice of Tommy Vance, because it was Tommy Vance behind me, and when I heard that voice, that silky deep voice, I was like, "Oh!" I really did. It did fry me, you know, because of sitting with your headphones on. And these are the things that make you. These are the subjective things. But even with that, I think that I think what I want for music to be, I think it's one of the messages on the channel, is I think I want to concentrate on what brings people together with music. You know, I've become very aware that a whole ton of people have sort of come around my YouTube, and they have a certain. It's like when you start talking to me, it's so similar. So, Colin, I know we can start talking about Tommy Vance. We can start talking about those budget albums you got in the 70s, and you could sort of predict it through, can't you? You know, certain bands that had an effect. Like, were you into like Diamond Head and all those types of bands?
We're into the sort of heavy stuff. I mean, obviously, yeah, the AC/DCs and Motorhead and stuff like that. But I kind of sort of early 80s, I started getting into the prog stuff. It wasn't the 70s. It was just
You early out. Same with me. I was just trying to guess whether it was that sort of Iron Maiden Diamond Head thing, because that was one of the things for me.
Really heavy into the punk scene.
Yeah.
I found, but I think that was because it was an easy way out playing guitar, wasn't it?
Yeah.
To get away with 2 or 3 chords. And but heavily sort of 80s onwards, then you're buying stuff that was 10 years previous. Getting into the first thing I ever got into was Rick Wakeman. Because I was from a churching background, I was always listening to church organs, and when I heard Six Wives, that was my entrance to that kind of thing. And Patrick Moraz, anything keyboard, Vangelis. Yeah.
But that was also a big thing in the 70s in the UK, wasn't it? You'd go around to people. My mum and dad didn't have those albums, but all my friends' dads often would listen to organ players.
Yeah.
You know, because the Hammond organ, the home organ had become a big thing, hadn't it? People
got dozens of Klaus Wunderlich albums.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
It's great.
So I'm gonna draw. We're nearly to the end of this. So what are the conclusions? We've had a bit of a chat about it. What do you think? What do you think? How does it work? Colin, what do you think?
I think Dorian mentioned that the jazz and rock seems to get a bad hand. Possibly because of the way that it affect culture. People rejected it, didn't they? They hated it. You know, and you know, you're a devil if you like rock music. You're weird if you like jazz music. Whereas the other world music and flamenco, there wasn't that stigma, was there?
No. And the
attracted the rebel in us.
Yeah, there is something that no one talks about, and I don't even know whether I'd want to talk about it on the channel, because it gets into certain race things as well. Exactly. Is that I feel that there's a sort of racism in music where it's not racist. There's
specific styles are attributed to specific people,
and one group or identity group is allowed to do certain things and one can't, you know. So for example, against sort of like black music, jazz, blues and all that, it's always made out of that sort of primitive music that people are playing from the heart and soul, you know, that they're not intellectual. And I know that Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Charlie Parker, these are the most intellectual people on the planet. This wasn't
Thelonious Monk.
Yeah, this was a heavy music. It was an intellectual music. They were, you know, they were studying Stravinsky, quantum physics, all the things stored you hear. But if you take an artist like Louis Armstrong and you just Google Louis Armstrong innate genius, there's websites that keep calling. Why call him an innate genius? Why call Louis an innate genius? Why don't they call Stravinsky an innate genius? They never describe him like that.
Right.
But by the same token, a lot of jazz and blues musicians are allowed to show virtuosity. And when you get into prog, which is a much more sort of white middle class and essentially British form, you know, British people being virtuoso is a bit. Oh, I don't know. And you feel that there's these. I've always felt that.
No, but you keep on, you keep preaching that outside England, it's not really prog, and that sort of bothered me, and still does.
Yeah, but
because
I'm right. You see, Darren, I'm just totally.
Yeah, I
right.
know. I'm just trying
right,
to.
this. While we're here, and in the last few minutes, I'm going to really explain what I think, because I've got someone in front of me that is. You're not obviously English like me and Colin, and you obviously like all sorts of pop.
No, but I completely get it. I just have to sort of undermine it.
You know, krautrock and all that can and all.
Oh yeah,
they're
of course.
incredible bands, but it's a different thing. It's
a
like,
different thing.
Yeah, it's as close to punk as it is. Is it close to electronica? It's that's just a different thing, right? For me.
Yeah.
The bands that are really good in Europe, like Focus, that aren't like that. Can just say Can is like the best. But Focus is more like English prog, because it's influenced like that, and it's not. And I got it. And if I was really going to argue against myself, the Italian prog bands are very good, and they have got an Italian aesthetic in there.
Yeah,
but, things like American
BFM and stuff like that.
I mean, except for Frank Zappa, and then Frank Zappa's his own thing. Own thing. Prog has to have that whimsical English aspect to it. That's what that. And I'm being, after arguing that I think everyone should open up the arms to call everything prog. Black Midi's prog, Radiohead's prog. Kendrick Lamar's prog. I love that, but at the same token, it's like it's historically. But my argument has always been that Englishness. You don't have to be English to have it. Or at least you should have the real intention and knowledge of how to do it in order to make it sound like it, right? So that's like, there could be bands which will do things that sound like British prog, and you would sort of have to put them in the same genre, but like deep down, that it's just sort of maybe it's a little pretentious. So it's better to stick to your guns. If you come from a different country or from a different style of aesthetic, that you could do prog and it will be great and amazing. Just make it your own and make it real. Your own, and I think everyone who's done that, Todd Rundgren, Frank Zappa. I mean, Frank Zappa did before the big English people anyway. Faust, all those bands that you go, well, yeah, that's them almost taking it, but gone off in their own direction. So it opens up another thing. I'm going to finish up now, because we've got like 3 minutes to go. Okay. I think having this conversation, I do think it's the case that you are, when you talk about music, you're always going from your culture, which is what we've just been talking, personal history, right? And the thing that does never get discussed is the biological part of it, the really fundamental things. And I think that's basically been my thesis on this video. I'm going to be trying to explain it in a very strange way. The video I'm doing at the moment is very strange. It's not like one of my normal videos. So, and I want it to go all over the place. So I'd like to have this discussion at the end, because I'm trying to explore the actual boundaries of YouTube, the actual aesthetics of that as well, you see. And I love this idea that there's patrons and they're coming in and now they're getting involved with what I'm doing. I just love that. I think it's brilliant. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to switch off. Do you want to say goodbye to everybody that's watching?
Yeah.
Goodbye. Thanks for coming, you guys, and we'll do the jazz one next week.
Yeah, sure.
Lovely.
I hope you enjoyed this very strange video. Like I said, Sunday afternoons for me are now becoming philosophy Sundays, where I go a little bit wider and weirder, and I sometimes may even push
the very mechanism of the YouTube, whatever this is, vlog, you know, someone talking into camera. I'm doing a little bit of, oh my God, I just kicked the camera. I'm doing a little sort of bit of postmodernism, alienation, you know, what's going on and all that type of stuff. Oh, I'm so weird and wacky, aren't I? So if you like me being weird and wacky, then put a like on, subscribe, ring the notification bell. If you want to come over to Patreon and get involved in all the stuff we're doing, come over to Patreon. Hope you enjoyed this one. I know it's been a bit strange. I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.